So tonight, 1031 exchanges is part of the tax code, and I'm going to walk you through what that's all about, from soup to nuts. But we're going to end up talking about some boring stuff like math and taxes and legal stuff. It's all part of it, but this is one of the tools to keep your money when you're trading property from A to B, and I'll walk you through it so you get a feel for what this is all about. So this is really about money. So don't get distracted by all the other complicated stuff. This is about keeping your money and investing it in more property, right? Somewhere else. Do I point at you? I think everybody knows you got to pay taxes when you make money, right? It's the American way. Uncle Sam gets a piece, Aunt Virginia, everybody wants a cut. I call them your partner in the transaction, whether you want them there or not. You did all the work, but they get a piece. But they're willing to go with you to the next transaction when you do an exchange. Okay, I'll walk you through this. I'm going to talk about who I am and what we do. What is an exchange, just by definition? Where does it come from? What's the definition of like kind? You're going to hear the term like kind exchange. What does that mean? What's the timing and identification step? The government gives you a certain window of time to replace your investment, and you got to do it in that window. How much do you have to buy to not pay taxes? The role of the qualified intermediary, which is what I am. I'm a middleman for 1031 exchanges. I'll explain that. And then process and paperwork, and then we do them backwards. Normal sequence is sell and buy something, and then what happens if you want to buy something ahead of time before you've sold? And there's a mechanism to do that. And then a little bit of end game strategy, things I see clients doing, right? If you have a question, just yell at me, right? I find it's better if I answer your question as we go, otherwise you'll forget it. It'll be lingering out there. My dad started our company in 1990, right when the regs came out. So we are 33 years old. This is all we do is help people with 1031 exchanges. I added my son, so we're on third generation, this little niche business of being a middleman for 1031 exchanges. Dad wrote a book. His birthday is Friday. He'll be 93. He rewrote the book at 90, republished it on Amazon by himself. There's a few typos in it, but God bless him, at 90 he rewrote a tax book, right? We're one of the few companies in the country that have been through what's called a private letter ruling. What does that mean? You can submit to the IRS and say, hey, I can't figure out my taxes, tell me. And they'll issue a private letter ruling. So we had two sisters inherit a duplex in Florida. One sister moved into her half, and the other sister let her sit empty. It just sat there. She didn't rent it, didn't offer it for rent, did maintenance on it, right, to keep it going, but that's it. When it came time to sell, she wanted to know if she could do an exchange on this thing that was just sitting there. And the answer came back, yes. You can exchange that property that's just sitting there. So you don't have to rent a property necessarily. As part of that, our paperwork got swept into the government. So we had to make a few changes, but my point here is we're comfortable what we do on a day-to-day basis has been through a smell test with the government. Very few people have been through that drill. We're members of our national association. I'm a past president, all that stuff, industry-wise. Virginia has law on companies like myself, and then we implemented a system called Always Safe. In the exchange process, somebody sells something, the money goes to escrow, and it sits there. The point is you don't get the benefit of the money from a sale, because that is a sale if you take the money. So the government created our role to be in between the transactions. We got to protect the cash. So Virginia's got law on how we do that. Okay, cool. I carry a designation called CPS, so it's industry. I'm not an attorney. I'm not a CPA. I just live and breathe this stuff all day long. This is what I do. Okay? Ann and Julie work for me, and there's what, 15 of us doing this. And we do exchanges all over the country. Mostly Mid-Atlantic, Maryland, Virginia, D.C. is our bread and butter. We do a lot at the beaches. Ocean City, Bethany, Outer Banks, there's a lot of rentals at the beach. So we do a lot of those transactions. I think I've swapped half the Outer Banks. Because the money's up here. Everybody owns the beach, right? So I always start with the word planning. It's easy to put on my screen. You've got to plan this stuff out because it comes with a clock. You close on a property, you got to know where you're going in 45 days. I'm going to talk about that in detail. If you don't plan it out, you're going to miss the boat. You end up being a taxpayer. Okay? So you've got to plan this stuff out. We can't emphasize that enough. This is only about investment property, and I'm going to define that. Real estate agents are in the middle of the process. They see everybody selling and buying. I got the normal legal, settlements, contracts, all that stuff. This should be the first phone call you make to the CPA. Hey, I'm selling my property. How much tax am I going to pay? If it's a little number, just sell it, dump it, get out. If it's a big number, wait a minute, maybe I should trade it for a different property and keep that money and roll it forward. But they're the ones that should help you make that decision. You got to know your numbers before you get into one of these things. I can't emphasize that enough. Okay? Taxes is a big deal. Motivation for doing this. I did a transaction for a 92-year-old doctor down on H Street in DC. I don't know if you guys remember H Street. There was a big article in the paper recently. The developers were down there taking the whole place. So it was about $2.3 million sale. Little row house where he had his doctor's office. They exchanged. His daughter-in-law was an attorney, so he had good help. They spent all the money except for about $93,000. They bought all this stuff. And I'm like, just take the cash. He'll pay tax on that little bit of cash he puts in his pocket. He was adamant, no, I am not paying taxes on that cash. I don't want to give the government any money. They ended up buying a couple of parking places to eat up that money, and so he didn't end up paying any taxes. My point is, he was letting the tax decision drive his investment decision, which is the wrong way to do it. But God bless him, he was 92 years old. He could do whatever the hell he wanted to do. So it was I don't think the way you should do it that way, but the tax, drive the dog, but tail of it. I have an orange property. I want a blue one. Just change it, move it, swap it for a different one. Cash flow, I'm sitting on dirt, mowing grass, paying property taxes. I trade that for a rental property and generate cash flow. I did a transaction for a family off of Route 50, headed out to Middleburg, out west of Chantilly. They were in the cow business, pushing cows around, losing money. And the data center guys banged on their door. Big dollars showed up, right? So they traded that for an entire row of townhouses down in Gainesville. So they went from dirt, losing money, pushing cows around, to cash flow. And they were happy campers. That worked out well for them. Right? Good example of change the investment for something that works better for them. Maintenance, maybe mine's 100 years old. I don't like it anymore. I got to fork over all this money for a new roof. Just dump it and trade for something nice and shiny, a new one, right? That doesn't have as many headaches. Maybe it's bad property, right? The neighborhood you bought into is great, but it's stagnated. I'm stuck. I got to get out. Dump it, or go find where the grass is greener. Everybody knows where that is. Opportunity. You guys know Haymarket? There's a hospital now in Haymarket, and maybe 5, 10 years old now. There's that big building sitting across the street from it. Maybe I sell my rental townhouse and swap into an office condo, and I'm going to rent it to the heart doctor, a guy named Dr. Tahiri. I know him because my dad lives there, because I know he'll pay the rent. So, but that's my opportunity. I transition my investment to a different kind of investment and make more money, okay? And then leverage. I see this all the time. I sell one, take that cash, go buy two, and leverage up. Borrow a bunch of money. Use that cash to borrow more. Sell those two, go buy 4, and leverage up and grow well. So motivation for doing this, all over the map. Okay, cool. A little bit of history. This stuff has been in the tax code since the 20s. It's over 100 years old. It's not a new concept. Trading, swapping. Farmers used to swap land all the time. It's normal stuff. Okay? What the government quickly figured out is if two farmers swap land, there's no money. How do you tax that transaction when there's no cash? And the farmers knew the values, but nobody else did. So the premise of a swap has been not taxable forever. Okay? In '79, we had the Starker case. I don't know if you've ever heard the term Starker exchange. Well, he's the one that gave us the delay. So he structured a couple of transactions where he gave up ownership and then later got replacement property in the future. Okay?
We'll see how the vote comes.
'84, we got timing to do an exchange. They gave us 45 days to identify and 108 days to get her done. I'll talk about that here in a minute. Mr. Starker had done his over multiple years, and the government didn't like that. 86 is when we got capital gains treatment. 89 is when we got related party and foreign property rules. 1991 is really when the exchange world changed, because that's when the government issued the how to do it. If you're going to do a delayed exchange, sell something and buy something later, do it this way. And they created a safe harbor, which created the middleman role, and that's when my dad jumped into the business. Okay? In 2000, we got guidance on doing it backwards, which I'll talk about. 2002, we got guidance on tenant and common property. It's okay for you to go in with others to buy property as tenants in common, and nowadays we see what's called DSTs, Delaware Statutory Trusts. So a trust will own the real estate, and you can buy a beneficial interest in the trust, and it is real estate, because the government said it was, and I'll talk about that. 2008, we got a safe harbor from the government on vacation properties. Like I mentioned, there's a lot of beach properties that I do. People rent them during the summer, but then they want to use them off period, right? And when do you transition from a second home, play property, and purely investment property? And the government gave us some guidance on that. 2009, we got a change to the homeownership rules. There's a strategy out there to eventually move into one of your rentals and convert it to a primary. And then what's the ripple effect when you go to sell that primary, now that you've changed it from a rental to your primary? And in 2010 is when the law went into place in Virginia. All right, what is an exchange? Just by definition. Allows a tax-deferred exchange, investment, rental, or business property and defer the tax payment. Normally there's a delay. Somebody sells, everything passes through somebody like me, a QI, and they buy something new. This is where it comes from. So it's in the law. This is not a program or a scheme. It's part of the tax law. No gain or loss should be recognized on the exchange of real property held for productive use in trade or business if such property swapped for the same purpose. So it's got to be real estate for real estate. I put the real word in here because when we went through tax reform in 2017, we lost all the personal property. We used to do exchanges for Luckstone, you know, the quarry guys. We used to exchange all their equipment. And so they trade in a bulldozer and get a new bulldozer. Those were all exchanges. And you had to have somebody in the middle like me. I did cows. Can you believe that? You'd swap cows. You had to be females for females. And they came in pairs with babies. I had to learn all this cow stuff. It was fascinating. It was a bunch of dairy farmers up in Pennsylvania. Anyway, what that language means is a trade, a true swap. This was a rental house up here in Northern Virginia. That's the Hardys in Franklin, Virginia. Anybody know where Franklin, Virginia is? West of Norfolk. Right? There's a paper plant in town. Kind of has an odor in town. Right? But these two guys find each other, swap deeds. That's a straight exchange. We used to do equipment exchanges, but those are long gone now. Right? We called it yellow iron because everything was yellow. We had the Starker case. So he's the key guy in our business. He's the one that gave us a delay. He owned a bunch of timberland, cut a couple of deals with timber companies where they took his land from him and gave him a promise. And they bought replacement property for him years later. So he had given up his land, but he didn't get anything but a promise. And then they replaced his property. He turned it into the government as an exchange, and they denied it. The IRS said, wait a minute, it's not simultaneous swapping deeds. It doesn't work. He went to court and won. You challenged him a second time, he won the second time. The key language down here is from the legislative history, if the taxpayer's money is still tied up in the same kind of property. And the answer was yes for Stark. He gave up his land, but he didn't get anything. He didn't benefit from giving it up. And then he still owned real estate when it was all said and done. So it's okay to have a gap in time between giving up and getting the new. Does that make sense? Cool. So now the government had to deal with that, and they gave us a regulation. Remember, you see a 1 dot, that's a regulation from the IRS. A deferred exchange, a delayed exchange, where there's a gap in time between ownership, is defined as an exchange pursuant to an agreement. So the timber company had an agreement with Mr. Starker. I have an exchange agreement with my clients when they're giving up property. Transfers property held for productive use in trade or business. This is typically the buy and hold space. Okay? That's the relinquished. And then subsequently later receives property of the same type. So the sequence has got to be give up the old, get the money, and buy the new. That's what most people do. Does that make sense? So who's the middleman? So we are a fig Newton of their imagination. They made us up. It's a person who's not the taxpayer, so you can't be your own middleman. Or a disqualified person, which means agency, so you can't have your realtor or your mother or somebody like that be the middleman, because that's agency. Your agent is you. Enters into a written agreement by the taxpayer, acquires the relinquished property from the taxpayer. So mechanically, when I create my agreement with the client, they're giving me their property on paper, and I sell it. And I take the money from escrow, okay, from the sale. That's why I end up with the money, because I'm stepping into the transaction. And then I acquire the new property. So I sell the old one, buy the new one, and then make sure the client is the owner. So you sell a rental, you've handed it to me, I take the money from the sale, take the money to buy what you tell me to buy with the money, and make sure you're the owner. You had property, you don't get anything in the middle, you still own real estate when it's all said and done. So this was the creation of the government, okay? Oh. So this is what I normally see. A sale, just like normal, contract to sell. I get hired, I gotta be hired before closing, because remember, by definition, I'm the one doing the transfer. And I'm assigned into the sales agreement. That's how I step into the deal you cut. There's an assignment for me to step into the transaction, okay? And then I'm promising to buy what you tell me to buy with the money. We close and we deed directly from whoever's selling to the buyer. So I don't get in the deed process. We put the money in escrow and the clock starts ticking. Choose and, contract for what you want. Go get a contract to buy it. I get assigned in, I'm stepping into your shoes to be the buyer. I'll move the money to close, and then we tell the title company to deed it directly to you all. So mechanically, it looks like a sale or a purchase, and this weird little company in between, because you don't get the money in the middle. You don't benefit from sale. Does that make sense? You had real estate, you still got real estate when it's all said and done. That's the goal. Yes, sir.
Why do you put yourself in a contract? Why don't you not just facilitate the exchange without being an actual party to the contract?
I gotta be assigned in because it's in the regulations. That's how I stepped in. It's literally right there. I get assigned in, yeah.
Sounds like a lot of money.
It's the rights to the contract, not the obligation. So it's a limited assignment. Okay? But functionally, I gotta be party to the deal to sell the property by definition. And I'm the one doing the transfer. It's paper, right? But mechanically, I'm the one doing the transfer.
On the way to the deed, there could be a lot of issues.
Well, it's instantaneous. It's in moments, right? Never had an issue. Yeah, no.
So, Bill,
Yes.
by this logic, then, presumably you have already the property that you're purchasing.
Hopefully, you
everything,
targeted
right.
the new one.
Right.
Hopefully.
You don't want to go into this with a property that you're selling on the market and no idea where you're going with it, right?
The odds are bad if you don't know where you're going.
Right.
Especially in this market, right? Because inventory is super tight. You don't know where you're headed.
Yeah.
And if
So
it
have-
fails, the worst case is you pay your taxes. That's your worst case.
Okay.
So that's not a bad. Nobody went broke paying taxes. I guarantee it. So, yes, especially in this market. It used to be the period of time between somebody closing and we were buying was 60 to 90 days. Okay? We're down to 3 weeks. So things are moving beyond fast now. So they close and 3 weeks later we're already sending money to buy something. Because clients have hustled to find the new property at it. Okay? Cool. Let me do the math. I told you we were going to do math. I'm going to do math. So here's my scenario. I'm selling a rental property at $500,000. I bought it for $150,000. That's my original cost. I've taken 45 grand of depreciation. If you're in the rental business, you know what depreciation is, right? A little bit for wear and tear every year on your tax return. And I owe 90. There's my debt. Let's do the gain. We're trying to calculate your capital gain. Got my sale price at $500,000. It's going to cost me 40 grand to get out. I use a rule of thumb of 8%, 6% commission, and 2% for the rest of the stuff, transfer taxes, pay the closing company, all that stuff. Less my cost basis of $150. I didn't do any improvements to the property. I just sat there. I did maintenance, but no big dollars. less the depreciation I took, because I'm writing off my investment every year for wear and tear. Gives me a tax basis of 105. So when I go to sell this $500,000 property, and I have a basis of 105, my gain is 355 grand. The first tax the government wants back is that depreciation you took at a maximum 25%. That's 11,250. That's the one most people miss. They don't understand. You cash out, you got to pay back the deduction you took every year. Right? It's got to go back. The profit, the appreciation, is 310. That's at 15% long-term capital gains. Right? You own an asset more than a year, you're into 15% money. But I'm showing 46. But we have a progressive tax system. The more you make, the more you pay. The first one that's going to kick in is this 3.8% net investment tax income, and that applies if you're single above 200 and 250 for married. So this is 355 grand going on somebody's tax return along with all their other income. This is going to hit that transaction. The rate, the capital gain rate, changes to 20 if your taxable income is above 492.3 for singles, 553 for married. They're weird numbers because it's adjusted for inflation, and they just changed it here within the last couple of weeks. So that's a pretty high hurdle. My point here, I'm showing 57,750. That's too low because there's other things going to ripple through that tax return. I don't know if anybody's ever written a big check like that. I have, right? I call that your pain number. Does it hurt? You can't even fit all the numbers on the line, right? Anybody still write checks? You got to remember, Virginia wants a piece too, right? We're at 5.75. So I'm showing 78. I'll bet by the time this ripples through the tax return, it'll be 90 grand. So there's the business decision. I'm selling a $500,000 townhouse. I've done all the T's, right? Toilets, tenants, trash, termites, all that stuff. And I got to fork over 90 grand. Do I want to do that? God bless you. Absolutely. Or keep that money and roll it forward to buy more investment property. Keep the train running. That's what this is about. Okay. All right, what can you swap into? You've done your math. You know your numbers. That's a big hit. I don't want to give up that much money. It's taken me a long time to earn it, so I'm going to keep it. Let's go buy something new. The definition of like kind is real property for real property. So any kind of real estate for any other kind of real estate. And go from dirt into a rental beach house, hotel, warehouse, mix and match, anywhere in the country. So the definition is very broad, okay, of what you can exchange into or out of, as long as it's all held as business investment property. Okay, that's usually the buy and hold property. It's also the bundle of rights. So I did a transaction not too long ago for a cell tower easement, the easement underneath the tower and the little road that ran up to it, for a conservation easement up in Maryland. So it's the whole bundle of rights. Oil and gas is a big part of this transaction. Texas and Oklahoma, that's normal out there. Mineral rights, right? I've done density rights, development rights, all that stuff. It's all part of the real estate. Right? So you got to broaden your thought process. We're in the middle of a cell tower easement deal right now. So, okay, since that's so broad, what's not covered under 1031? Primary residences are not covered. That's section 121 of the code, so that's a different section of code. So this doesn't apply to your home. Second home, vacation home, if you use it more than 14 days or 10% of the days rented, that becomes a second home. Okay? That doesn't qualify. That's for rich people, not business people. And so it won't qualify. But if you keep your personal use down to a minimum, then that'll qualify for an investment property as an exchangeable property. Okay? Dealer property is not exchangeable. What do I mean by a dealer? Builders, developers, and that's really where the flippers fit. Right? If your goal is just buy it, fix it, and sell it, that's just income to you when you sell it. If you're holding, then you can exchange it. By definition, it's a business investment that's been held. It usually means the buy and hold property. Okay? Does that make sense? Okay. Partnership interests are not exchangeable. Let me use an example. I decided to buy a beach house with my neighbor. The attorney told us to create an LLC. Down at the courthouse, there's this LLC that owns it. I'm a member, he's a member. The LLC is a taxpayer. It files its own tax return, and I get a K-1 and he gets a K-1. We get our share of it's a pass-through entity, it passes through the individual. When it comes time to sell, the LLC can do an exchange, not the members. Because I own an interest in a company, I don't own the real estate itself. But I hate my neighbor. I don't like him anymore. So I don't want to be in business anymore. So there's strategies out there called drop and swap, where we collapse the business, redeed the property, tenants in common, 2 owners down at the courthouse, hold for a while, and then we exchange. And I swap my half interest. I don't care what happens to him. I hate him. Okay? But you got to own real estate to do an exchange. Related parties. What does that mean? So for some reason, the government has targeted the buying from a related party. What does that mean? Mom and dad, brothers, sisters, kids in your direct bloodline, or any entities that they might control. There's an LLC out there with my mother and my sister that couldn't buy from that. So that's my family. That's direct blood. The government is after this transaction, so don't be buying from a related party. What I see is son is selling a rental and he wants to buy mom's home and rent back to mom. That would be a bad transaction. If there's been any activity from the IRS in this space, it's on related party. They don't like it for some reason. Cool. There's an exception there if everybody is doing an exchange. We finished a transaction here not too long ago where the son sold a rental, bought dad's rental. Dad exchanged for a brand new 3-story Stanley Martin townhouse that was gorgeous. We looked it up. But that was also a rental. So nobody cashed out. Everybody held, right? Exchanged again. And as long as you hold for 2 years, you're good to go. It's usually when somebody's cashing out, which is usually what somebody's trying to accomplish. The government's looking for that. Cool. You can't swap outside the U.S. except for Virgin Islands, Guam, and the Marianas Islands. Now, why am I telling you all that stuff? I've done exchanges out of Guam. You'd never know it's different from there. It's just like going up the street and doing deeds, just like doing phone calls are clear as a bell. It's fascinating. Puerto Rico's out. Puerto Rico's not part of the U.S. or Puerto Rico. Cool. All right. Timing. The government gives you 180 days to replace your investment. So from closing to owning the new is 180 days. The hard part of an exchange is you've got to identify in the first 45 days. What does that mean? That's a piece of paper between the client and me, the middleman. They're telling me what to buy. There's 3 rules. One is called the 3 property rule. They're giving me a list of 3 of any value. You can put skyscrapers on there, it doesn't matter, the value. That's what most people use, is 3 property rules. The second rule is called the 200% rule, meaning if the list is 4 or more, it's limited to 2 times what was sold. I use the example of a $500,000 sale. That means $1 million could be on the list. I don't know if somebody will sell a $2 million warehouse, and they want to buy a bunch of small dollar properties to replace that. They could give me $4 million worth of small dollar properties, and that would be okay. Okay? Does that make sense? Most people are targeting that same kind of value to replace someplace else, a better investment somewhere else. Cool. The 95% rule is a catch-all. If the list is more than 3 and it's more than 2 times what was sold, you got to buy the whole list. 95% of the list. And so I rarely see that. It's sort of a catch-all. All right, cool. This is the hard part of an exchange. No ifs, ands, or buts about it. You close, 45 days later, you got to tell me what we're buying. And that's the hard part in this market, especially. Cool. Once we go past the 45th day, that list can't change. That's what I mean by hard part. So let me just paint the picture. We close, money goes to escrow, clock is ticking. I'm waiting for you to tell me what to buy. We get to the 45th day. If you don't give me a list, I stop. and return the money on day 46. I don't have a list. I don't know what to buy.
Just think about this. You buy a property first, close it in like 3 months, sell your property in that 3 months.
I'm going to talk about doing it backwards. I am. I'm going to talk about doing it backwards, reverse it. But law is sell and buy. But I'll show you how we do it backwards. Cool. Good question. This is not about contract dates, so it's ownership dates. So what we see today, because the market is so tight, the minute you get a contract to sell before closing, you're starting to contract for the new one. And the ideal scenario is you close on yours and you're already under contract to buy the new one, well before the 45th day. That's the ideal, and it's cheap advice on my end, right? Because that's hard to do. But those are the ones that work. The clients that wait till we're at the end of the month, we usually get a surge at the end of the month because people realize, oh my God, I got a giant tax bill and I'm closing on Friday. What do I do? They're deciding to do an exchange like now. They have no idea what they're going into. They haven't even thought about it. Right? So they're just now learning about, I got a tax bill. Odds of them succeeding to buy something are hard. You're trying to make decisions on new investments of big dollars in 45 days. That's nuts. So that goes back to my planning. The sooner you work on it, know what you want to buy, the better. Cool.
You made this thing, right?
Okay. I always get asked, can I extend this so we get more time? These things are baked into law, these dates. So the only extensions are if the president declares a disaster. 9/11 was the very first extension on 1031, but only when the president declares disaster and FEMA publishes, you get more time. So I always tell everybody, if you need more time, you got to pray for a disaster. Otherwise, you ain't getting any more time. You can't call Senator Warner or Tim Kaine. You know, the dog ate my contract. I got to have some more time. Doesn't work. I lobby to those guys to protect 1031. That's part of what we do, is educate them on the Hill. So that I'm on their Christmas list because I give them cash. And so they send me little love notes. You know, hey Bill, I want more money. It's all part of the process. Sausage making. Ownership, title. The tax owner that sells has got to be the same tax owner on the buy side. Bill sells under my social. I got to buy the replacement property. Got to be consistent, right? There's a couple of exceptions. Single member, single owner LLCs. Bill sells individually. Bill LLC buys, and Bill is the sole member. That's my business. I'm the sole owner, and I take title to the new one. It's still me. That's okay. Revocable trust. Bill sells individually. Bill, trustee of Bill's revocable trust, takes title to the new one. That's also okay. Revocables don't file tax returns. So titling, there's some exceptions here. Okay. And the Delaware Statutory Trust, I'm going to talk about those near the end, but it's a form of ownership, and you're buying a beneficial interest in the trust. Your name is not down at the courthouse, but you're an owner of this trust, and that is real estate. And it's only because the government said it is. And then the purchase of an LLC is also okay. What am I talking about?
You said eyes.
Let me use an example. I sold my rental townhouse. There's an office condo that's owned by an LLC with 3 doctors in it. So this LLC owns the condo that I want to buy. I can buy the 3 doctors out, become the sole member of the company that's already on deed, and that's okay in the exchange. Why would somebody buy the company rather than the real estate itself? We don't see it a lot around here, but they're trying to avoid transfer taxes. In other states, you change the ownership, they'll jack the tax rates up on you. So they're trying to hide that transfer of ownership. So they're transferring the companies rather than the deed itself, that courthouse. Okay? To make a partnership. You put, and down the road is the word, how long do you have to hold the new one? Our generic answer is a year-ish of time. Hold it on your books before you start changing the tax owner. You bring in another member, you create a partnership. And that gets a different tax return. It's a different business. It's sort of a, nobody can tell you how much is long enough. Sometimes it's bridge tax returns. I have it on this year's return, and it's on next year's return under my social. But there's no magic. The government didn't tell us it has to be this long, and they won't tell us. Cool. All right, how much do you have to buy to not pay tax? Exchanging is about continuing the investment, okay? Here's my scenario. This is a good slide. I'm selling $500,000. It's gonna cost me 40 to get out. I'm down to this 460 number. We call that the adjusted sale price. To not pay tax, I gotta go buy another 460 worth of real estate. I'm replacing my real estate, okay? At closing on the sales side, I gotta pay off my mortgage. I'm left with 370 of cash. I gotta reinvest the cash. So to not pay tax, it's replace the value, and that value number is here, and put all the money back in. So if I'm buying again at 460 and I put 370 down, where will the rest of the money come from? I'm gonna go get another mortgage, or I break the piggy bank and I put cash in. But the premise is replace the investment, that value, and put all the money back in. So if you think about it financially, I had a property worth 460 and I had 370 in cash in it. Tomorrow I have a property worth 460 and there's 370 cash in it. Nothing changed financially. I still own that much real estate, just a different address. So it's still the same investment. Okay? Just different location. No, you paid for it. Purchase price, right. Go back. This can be multiple properties, and that can be multiple properties. It's not one for one, it's just how many dollars of real estate did you give up? How many dollars did you replace? Yes, ma'am.
So you can't deduct whatever you have to pay off on the mortgage.
Correct.
To buy what
I love 2 miles in the
the sell price was.
That adjusted number, that's correct, right. Yeah, the government doesn't like that. You pay off your debts and just put the cash over here. They'd never make any money if we all did that, right? Yeah, it doesn't work that way, and that's a common question. I just want to put the cash back in. It doesn't work that way. Common question. We had I'm in Prince William. Our office is Gainesville. So Prince William is hot data center stuff. Same with Loudon. We had a guy sell to one of the data center guys 33 replacement properties. So this was a big one. Can you imagine trying to buy 33 properties in 180 days? He did it. He spent all the money. He was a nutcase, but he did it. He had more people working for him than you can imagine. So fascinating. So it's not one for one. It's just dollars for dollars. Pardon?
More left.
I know. What's left, right? All right. All right. Now you got to do this. We got to do the safe harbor. We got to do the exchange. You got to have intent to do an exchange. Form and documentation are paperwork. Control the money, which is what I do. You got to buy like-kind properties, and then there's time limits to do this stuff, right? So we defined who the QI is, but who's disqualified. Anybody who's at agency cannot play the role of QI. So this is IRS language. I am a qualified intermediary because I'm not disqualified. So this is IRS logic. That's how it works. Right? You can have your neighbor Bob be the middleman if you want to. Just so Bob knows what the hell he's doing. Right? Cool. All right, process. I get started with a sale contract. Right, just from a process standpoint, what do we do? You're selling something, there's a contract to sell. I gotta be hard before closing. So I normally start from the contract, because that has all the details in it. Create my agreement before settlement. It's normally what, 30, 45 days before you go to settlement. So I do my paperwork in that window. We close, money comes to escrow, clock is ticking. We deal with a 45-day ID together. Your job is to go get that new contract. I gotta get my hands on what are we buying, right? You're gonna go get a normal contract. I'm gonna create an assignment, single piece of paper to step into the deal. And I'm gonna send settlement instructions to this closing company. Here's how much cash I have. Client's bringing the rest of the money. Buy this thing and deed it to my client when we're all said and done. The client reports on this form 8824. That's the tax form to the government to report an exchange. Nothing I do goes to government. I'm just a transaction. Okay? Cool. But it looks like a sale and a purchase. And I add a layer to it. Cool.
Bill?
Yes?
I've heard that as, you were talking about agency a lot, like is it frowned upon as real estate agents
Oh, no, there's no limits on personal exchange.
Or as a real estate agent.
No limit.
I think it was like a broker's before, it was just like
Over and over.
on as agents. So there's
No such thing. No such thing.
maybe it's just your agency that you were talking
Yeah, you can't be the middleman for a client that's doing an exchange because you are the client. You're the agent.
about. I feel like someone just scared me on it.
Yeah, that's scary. Skip this slide. All right. I covered a ton, very short window of time. Now we're going to do it backwards. Normal sequence, right? Sell, go through the QI, buy something new. You guys all got it. There'll be a test later. A couple of rules. You cannot exchange into something you already own. You can't swap with yourself. Okay? You can't own them both at the same time. Improvements on real estate you already own are not like kind. You sell something, big bucket of cash. You can't have me buy something, hold back some cash and buy some shingles to put on your new house. Because we're buying shingles on for a property you already own. That's not real estate, it's shingles. So it's got to be real estate for real estate by definition. Okay? Cool. We introduced what's called an EAT, exchange accommodation title holder. I'm gonna give you a couple of scenarios so you see what we're doing. Okay? Its job is to force the scenario that there's a sale and a purchase. Here's where it comes from. We're not geniuses. The government told us how to do it. So they tell us how to do it. There's my replacement property. There's the deal of the century. I got competition to buy it. If I don't close on it, I'm going to lose it. I haven't sold my dumpy townhouse yet. I want to sell it, but I haven't sold it yet. What do I do? You let an EAT step in and buy the new one for you. Exchange accommodation title holder. It's a placeholder, a straw man, whatever you want to call it. It'll sit there and hold the title for 180 days. You sell yours, you buy the new one from the holding company. So it's a way to make the sequence of sell and buy. You put a placeholder in place. Okay? Now, these are not the easiest things in the world to do. You see any issues here? Like, where's the money coming from? You want to buy something ahead of time, you got to come up with the cash. I have some wealthy clients, so they'll loan the money to the EAT. I give them a note, IOU, I'll take title to this thing. They sell this one, buy it from me, pay them back. What if we don't have all the money?
Are we doing this?
I always create LLCs when I step in and take title. If you go look up on the Virginia website for LLCs and search for REX, R-E-X, you're just going to see, what are we at, over 100 and something holding companies sitting out there. You can find us, right? That means the LLC is buying, so if we're borrowing money, most likely you got to go to the bank. And if we go to Wells Fargo, they don't know what you're talking about. But if we go to one of the local banks, they know what we're doing. So let's paint the picture. The bank loans 80% to the LLC, and I borrow 20% from the client. Right? So now there's a loan sitting there, and I borrow 20% from the client, 80% from the bank. This one sells, cash flows to buy from the holding company. The client can get their 20% back because they fronted it, and the rest of the money goes to pay down the debt. Because the goal is all the money that was here ends up in here. If the client fronted money, they can get that cash back. Sure.
Go back a couple slides.
Go back a couple slides.
Is
Yeah.
it logical that you can't trade with yourself?
Yes.
What if that entity is a corporation?
What if, okay, so the new one is held by a corporation. Who owns the corporation? You? The government will look through it. They'll look through a C Corp, they'll look through an S Corp, they'll look through an LLC.
And then the seasonal cheesecake, we
That's
have,
a number.
it's a rum chata and hazelnut.
They figured that
And then
out.
we also have some pumpkin.
One more. Hang on. Yep. Did you hear the question? What if the replacement is held by an LLC that you own? It's in an LLC, so it's not you, it's the company. The government will look through the company to see who the owners were underneath. So you're buying from C Corp, S Corp, but it doesn't matter what it is. They're looking. How many settlements do we have? There's 3, right? The EAT stepped in and bought. We sell this one, that's number 2. What we sell to the client is the LLC. So you remember my slides before, is we transfer the LLC, so we avoid a transfer tax. So in the end, the client owns the LLC that we use to take title. We don't have to go to the courthouse and do a new deed. So now they own the LLC that owns the replacement. So we're avoiding another transfer. So the feds say you gotta do all this maneuvering, and the local guys have their hands out every time you do a deed. We're trying to avoid that. That makes sense? So the law is sell and buy. So depending on what's going on, I'll strategize with a client as to what I should do. I could take the old property from the client. So it depends on where the money's coming from and what states we're in. Well, I'll strategize with the client on what to do, okay?
What are the tax ramifications? Are they still buying the LLC? They're in that situation now, so how do they see they want to buy the LLC?
They want to buy the company, right?
But what are the tax ramifications for the seller for selling them?
It shouldn't be any different. They're either selling the company that owns the real estate.
I just wanted to ask this.
Yeah, well, that's the right answer. Ask the CPA.
I was just curious.
Yeah, it shouldn't be any tax impact. Because the LLC owns the real estate, and it is the client. They buy the LLC, it's the sale of real estate. All right, let's do an improvement exchange. What am I talking about? I'm selling at $460. I found a beach house for $400. It's the deal of the century, but it needs a pool. So if I go from $460 and I go down to $400, I just expose some of my gains to taxes. And I don't want to do that because I still need a pool. So we let the EAT buy the new one and add the pool. So now it's worth $460. So while we hold it, we can improve it, put value into it. And then the transfer is $460 for $460. I did a transaction for some tow truck drivers. You guys know where Bealton is? Big intersection. There used to be a burger joint on the corner over there. It's gone now. You looked at them, they were knuckleheads, right? Dirty, driving these, trucks. They were the smartest guys under the sun. Classic millionaires next door. They own land on the south side of Fredericksburg, off of Route 1. They had us take the money from that and buy a lot on the north side of Fredericksburg, and they put up a car wash in 180 days. Now, who the hell they brought to get that done, I have no idea. But they went from dirt into a new business in 180 days. They were the sharpest guys on the list. They knew exactly what they were doing. So the minute we had stepped in with the holding company to buy this thing, the bulldozer was sitting there. Car wash is a good example. It's concrete, right? Blocks, lots of pipes. They're in business. They knew what they were doing. It was interesting. I did a transaction for a dentist out of Reston. Developer came in and bought the whole complex, all the condos. He took the money from the sale of his condo. He bought a replacement rental condo in Chantilly, and the rest of the money went to buy his new dental office in Herndon, and they did the build out. So we took all the money from that sale and pushed it into 2 replacement properties. He didn't pay any taxes to get from A to B. So he was a happy camper. Because if he had sold and paid his taxes, he'd been there for years. He could probably just replace his dental practice and would have given up the rest of it.
Speaking of build out, how does anybody with construction close on the land and you do that? That have to be done within 180 days.
Right, because I can hold for 180 days. Yes.
So the construction has to be complete within 180 days.
So he's asking the question, does the construction have to be complete? So let's paint the picture. This is 460. And it's a $200,000 gold pool we're putting in. When I get to 460 in value, installed, we finish. So it doesn't have to be finished, but the value's got to be installed. I've done plenty of transactions where the builder didn't have the roof on it, but we hit the value. Everything was attached. That's real estate. It's okay to buy a half-built house. What's the value? Okay? But when you identify, you got to tell us what we're buying. So you got what we're buying. That's right. The improvements, right? I'm putting up a 3-story, 2-bath, whatever it is. If you're trying to do this from the ground, it's very hard. I mean, just getting everything lined up, permitting, all that stuff. But if it's something like I'm using an example of a pool, I can get a pool done in 180 days, or a kitchen, or a roof, or all that stuff. I can get that work done in that tight window. But trying to go from ground zero up, it's just hard. especially during COVID, nothing was happening. All right, cool. All right, let me talk about this for a second, because this is a strategy a bunch of my clients are using. They're combining the homeownership rules in 1031. Let me give you an example. I sell a couple of rental townhouses, and I buy a beach house, a rental beach house. I rent it for 2 years. So I go from investment to investment, rent it for 2 years. I've been around here forever. I sell my home, and I put all my home money in my pocket. It's a sale of my home. And I move into my beach house. I convert it from rental to my primary. There's no tax due. Right? I haven't had a sale yet. So I use my investment property just paid for my retirement place. Okay? My goal is to pass away in my beach house with my gold pool. When I die, let's say the beach house is $1 million. That's what its value is when I pass away. My son Jeff inherits it, and his value, his new basis, is $1 million. So I have all this gain that I rolled in. It's sitting there. I pass away, he gets a new basis when I die. He sells it for $1 million, no tax. So in our business, you swap until you drop. And then the family has a party, right? Because they got all his money, hopefully in your name.
Right now, the regular city, so I can just.
What happens if my plan isn't working? I gotta go to the old folks' home. I gotta sell the beach house.
And the bourbon bread pudding. Do you want a cup of coffee with decaf?
Oh, I'm sorry. When can I move in? That's everybody gets excited. I bought the beach house, I wanna move in. Hurry up, right? So the government knows people wanna do that. Usually I see it on the buy side. I'm anxious to get into my new beach house. So they gave us a safe harbor of 2 years. And that's why I use the example, I rented for 2 years. You must rent for 14 days or more for each of the 2 years. It does not have to be a full-time rental. Okay? But you gotta keep personal use down to 14 days or 10% of the day's rate. Personal use is what taints a property, turns it into a second home. And from an exchange definition, it's business investment for business investment, not second home.
So your last one, what is the IRS?
Great question. When you have a rental property, you have a Schedule E. That's the form you fill out. On there is personal use. And so nobody lies on their tax returns. Everybody, you have to tell the government how much personal use. What you don't count is maintenance days. So that's what people do, is they do a lot of maintenance. These properties need a lot. You've been over to the Outer Banks, you go over the bridge, on the right-hand side there's a giant Home Depot, just as you turn south. We did that exchange for that guy, he's very wealthy. There's a lot of maintenance. The Home Depot's busy. You go a little bit farther south, there's a big Lowe's. We did that exchange for Holly and her family, they're very wealthy. More maintenance going on at the Outer Banks. There's no second homes, it's all investments that need a lot of maintenance. A lot of maintenance. All right, cool. Oh, there's the how do you know, right? It's right there. All right, so it used to be when you move into your rental and could live there for a couple of years and then sell it, you'd get another primary residence exclusion, full exclusion. Okay? They changed the law back in 09. Who the hell's keeping track of this? I don't know, but it's in the law. Let me use an example. It starts as a rental, and I'm using my example of the beach house. I rent it for 2 years, and let's say let's go to the next slide. I rent it for 2 years, and then I live there for 4. So I got 6 years of ownership on this thing. When I go to sell it, the way the tax law is written is I have to take a ratio of, I gotta fix this, it's 2 out of 6 years. 2 years of rental out of 6 years of ownership times the gain, whatever is built up in that property, is ineligible, meaning I'm gonna pay tax on it. So the old strategy of jump in, live there for a couple of years and bail out is not as good as it used to be. If it's a long-term strategy, it works really well. Okay? But the short-term jump in, jump out doesn't work as well as it used to. It's still there, it's just not, it got watered down. Okay? Cool. All right. Let's talk about ticks and DSTs. What am I talking about? This is $1 billion space. This market out there is $1 billion. It's okay to buy into these properties. choice. You can buy a tenant common interest, your name is down at the courthouse, or you can buy into a Delaware statutory trust, which is a beneficial interest in the trust that is real estate.
You have a whole bag of Halloween candy.
All kinds of properties are sold this way. A lot of what we see are the triple net properties, the standalone, the box stores, Lowe's, Home Depots. The big BJ's in Gainesville was a DST. It was owned by a Delaware statutory trust, and then individuals like you and I own pieces of it. It's gone what we call full cycle. It became a DST and it sold again, and those people exchanged again out. We have a lot of clients that are older because they don't want to go buy another rental. I'm tired. Why should I just go buy another rental property? So they'll move their money into a DST. Or they want to downsize. It's $1 million property because they've been sitting there forever. They'll go buy $500,000 and put the other half in a DST. So because it's just real estate dollars, this is another pool of choices that are out there to buy into. Mostly it's older clients that are doing this because they just want the cash flow and no headaches. They want to sit in the lounge chair and get their checks. Not worry about it. It's almost all commercial properties. Okay, got one more slide back. I think they're breeding these things. A lot of that is 1031 money chasing it because they're an ideal fit for just sitting there and, Dollar General just pays the rent. And they just sit there. Cool, right. So, I covered a ton, very short window of time. I probably used a bunch of words, like what the hell is he talking about, right? This is one of the tools in the toolbox to avoid paying taxes, to roll forward to something else. I got a lot of clients that are both flippers and buy and hold. Our cheap advice is run two businesses. One business is my LLC is my flipping business, and the other business is my buy and hold. There's a court case out there where a builder held raw land for 11 years. For some reason, it went to court, and because, even though he held it 11 years, you would think that would be long-term investment. Because he was a dealer, that's how he was classified. His regular income when he sold it. Got to keep the two away from each other. Two away from each other. Anybody have any questions? I know I'm talking foreign language here. That same value, let's say it's 460, you roll that into a DST. Many of them come with loans already on them. So if I had debt on the old one, I'm just picking up debt on the new one too. They already have it in place. I don't have to sign up for it. I'm sorry, answering the question. That's your goal. If you don't, no, it's the value. Because the profit goes with you and you replace the whole value. And my example is the 460 goes into something else. And it can be multiple. Sometimes these DSTs are sold as a portfolio. They own 5 Burger Kings. So you're getting a little piece of every Burger King in the portfolio. There's all kinds of flavors. Correct. We call it a fill-up. Filling up the DS.
I mean, I don't really care to see it. I just was fine seeing it. It was a lot of great. We went across the coffee shop.
Business investment is held for more business.
We had
That's the same thing.
drop our kids off randomly and then we did the honey and pops and drank for the
Two is when you're converting to commercial. So it doesn't quite fit that, but since we know that's safe, it's sort of generic. The market, especially with COVID, values were climbing like crazy. So I had people exchange in. 3 months later, they did an unsolicited offer. So they were exchanging again. Tech level. And then they would swap out. They got a big number. They go buy something else. I just made it. Yeah, because there's no defined definition in the law of how long you have to hold on purpose. You can, which is squishy word. Yeah, you put it on the market, who's getting unsquishy? You put it on the market, what do you do? No, now it's for sale.
So if you have a personal residence and then you rent it out,
Yeah, turn it to a rental.
then you can, then when you sell it, you do it.
gotta look at your home sale. If you're married, $500,000, you don't pay taxes. So if you have more than $500,000, you could take the $500,000 because you lived in it 2 out of 5 and exchange the rest if you want. I'll give you a good example. You guys know where Page Land is? Near the battlefields where the data centers are going. Rumor is they're $1 million a day. People are sitting on these homes. They got a lot more than $500,000 in profit. So they're all struggling. They only live on like 1 acre. The rest of it's tree. That investment. Trying to help them come out with the rest of it. Anybody learn anything? New words? Part of it? It's one of the tools in the toolbox. If you need help, my email's in there. Call me, email me, ping me your questions. Happy to help. The more you know, then you do it. Cool. Yes, sir.
Let's say a couple would buy another home as an investment property. Could they rent that to their son?
Sure. Fair market value. Treat them like a stranger.
Okay.
And usually you're going to discount a little bit because he's going to fix the washing machine.
Well, if you bought a property.
Gutters and all that stuff. Yeah, but will your son pay the rent?
Yeah.
I was going to buy a condo. My son went to NC State down Rockland. And this is when the crash was happening. I was going to buy a condo down there and rent it to him while he was in college. Right? Great strategy. But he had one of those cash cards, and I could watch him go up the street with Hillsborough Avenue and spend that money in bars. I knew my rent money was going to be in bars. Paying me back. All right, get that deal.
Yeah.
You going to pay me rent? And hope y'all learned something. What else you got? I'm done.
Awesome, Bill. Anybody else have questions? Yeah, it was super informative. A lot to think about.
Yeah.
Well, we appreciate it, Bill. Thank you for being here.
Of course.
We'll probably just wrap it up, right? Like, that was a lot of info. What time is it? I don't know. 7:19. 7:19. You guys want to hang out for a little bit, mingle, network? Oh, Amanda has a property she wants to show. She looked at yesterday, I believe.
Yeah. Trenton and I.
But thank you all for coming. Hopefully you learned something that was dense but super informative. Like, really good stuff in there. Great strategy for wealth building, which is why we're all here. So Amanda will show, then we'll hang out for a little bit. You guys want to eat, grab a drink. I encourage you to network.
For wholesaling and stuff right now, I think right now is a good time to buy some dirt. You know, we talk about that a lot, but I know in Warren County, the well setback is 100 feet. The state requirement's only 50. So the Builders Association is really pushing the first of the year. They've got some backing to that it needs to be reset back to 50. Most counties, Frederick County and stuff is 50. So if you go into a lot of places like Point of Woods and Lakefront Royal, there's a lot of lots that aren't buildable because of those setbacks. And honestly, a lot of people have been paying taxes, which they could have gone to the county and said, the lot's not buildable because the well setback. Yes, sorry. I thought you had a question. Yeah, so we're looking at changing the well setback. So we're going to take it to the county. I'm pretty sure that it will pass. So it's a good thing this next month or two to really start looking at lots that maybe are unbuildable. There are a lot of absentee owner lots. You know, I was like, let's go find some lots. There's a lot of them out there. So we need boots on the ground. So if you guys want to talk yeah, well, it's not really implemented in state to the building. It's only 50 feet. So technically, so before our previous county administrator was like anyone who came to get a variance, they would give it to them. You know what they want? They just don't have the money for you to pay for the variance. So we're like that makes sense. So if you're going to give the variance, just change the setback. And I sent you guys that email. Go to the big thing of it that had like the address. So it's Luray. I have the address and stuff if you guys want. This guy's paying a commission. It's a wholesale deal. I mean, it used to be a bar. Really, the whole upstairs is unfinished. The downstairs, it's kind of half. That's what we kind of went in the dark, and we're like, we got to go back in the light. We got there. The time change gets you. I was like, we have time. We have time to get there. And we really didn't. So obviously, there's some trash out just on the lot itself. I mean, if it was me personally, I would offer less. I looked at it, and I think it only sold. I think this guy or whoever owns it only bought it for like 60 or 70. I think a couple years ago. So, but I'll send out. He doesn't have the address on there, but close out.
We'll put together a follow-up email.
Yeah.
For this with the link because we're live streaming tonight.
Yeah. So it's an investor lift site. If you guys are familiar with investor lift at all, it has some other properties on there, but we'll send that out for you guys. Oh wow. I think that's a good lot.
Awesome. That's it for tonight. Thank you guys again.